The wind screamed across the cliffs of Valoria, carrying dust, lightning, and fear beneath a dark red sky. Soldiers in black armor dragged a small alien girl toward the edge. Her silver hair was tangled with dirt, her glowing violet eyes wide with terror. "By order of the Queen," the captain shouted, his voice cold and empty. "The cursed child must fall." The girl shook her head, her small hands shaking as she tried to speak. "Please." "I did nothing wrong," she cried. Her voice was thin, weak, yet filled with something that made even the guards hesitate. But the captain didn't. He pushed her closer to the edge. Behind them, the royal banners flapped in the wind, painted with the mark of the Valorian crown, the same crown that belonged to her mother. The queen herself, the little girl, Princess Lyra, didn't understand why her own people wanted her gone. She was only 7, too young to know the truth, that she was different. Half human, half Valorian, a child born from a forbidden union. The queen had once loved a man from the stars, a human from a lost fleet that crashed on Valoria. But when her people discovered the truth, the royal council called the child an omen, a danger that could bring shame to the throne. So now they would erase her. A final push came, and Lyra's small body slipped into the screaming wind. Her silver hair streamed behind her as she fell, eyes wide open, watching the cliffs vanish into clouds. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was the captain's emotionless face. The fall was long, too long. The air tore at her skin, cold and sharp. Her fragile wings, tiny, underdeveloped, flapped uselessly. A scream broke from her lips, but no one heard it. Then came silence. Her body hit the waves below, breaking bones, drowning breath. The sea swallowed her whole, dragging her deep into its dark belly. Hours passed, or maybe days, she didn't know. Somewhere between pain and dreams, she saw a faint blue light, soft and warm. It came closer, spreading through the water like a heartbeat. A voice spoke, not in Valorian, not in any alien tongue, but in English. "Hold on, little one. You're safe now." The voice belonged to a man, tall, human, with rough hands and tired eyes. His name was Ethan Cole, a survivor from a wrecked Earth ship that had crashed near the coast years ago. He had been living alone in the shadows of the valley, far from the cities that hated his kind. When he found the small girl washed up on the shore, half dead, something in his chest broke. He lifted her gently, his arms trembling. She was cold as ice, her skin pale silver and her heartbeat faint. He carried her back to his cave, a small shelter built from broken ship metal and old human tech. There he covered her with thermal blankets, whispering words she didn't understand. Hours later, Lyra opened her eyes. The glow in her pupils was faint but alive. She stared at him with confusion. "Who are you?" she whispered weakly. "I'm Ethan," he said softly. "I'm just someone who didn't want to see another child die." She tried to move, but the pain was too much. Tears filled her eyes. "They threw me away," she whispered. "My own people." Ethan didn't ask why, he just sat beside her. Watching the storm rage outside the cave, he had seen too many like her. Innocent lives broken by power and fear. But this child was different. There was something about her, the light in her eyes, the strange energy around her. For days he cared for her, feeding her, cleaning her wounds, teaching her to speak a little human language. Slowly she began to smile again one evening. As the twin sun set over the valley, Lyra sat beside Ethan, looking at the strange metal symbols carved into the cave wall. "The symbol of Earth," she pointed at it. "What is that?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That's my home," he said, "far away among the stars." She looked up at the sky filled with 1,000 glittering lights. "Is it beautiful there?" "Yes," Ethan whispered, "but it's gone now, at least for me." Lyra lowered her head. "Then maybe this can be our home," she said softly. Ethan froze. Her voice carried something pure, something human and something Valorian. He realized then that she wasn't just a lost child. She was a bridge between two worlds that feared each other. As night fell, Ethan wrapped her in a blanket and watched her sleep. He didn't know that the child he had saved would one day rise as the last heir to Valoria, and the spark that would bring humans back to the stars. Outside, the storm died down. The sea was calm but deep under its waves. Something ancient stirred, a signal, faint and forgotten, blinking once in the dark, and in that moment the universe shifted. For the fall that should have killed her had just begun a story that would change everything. The valley where Ethan and Lyra lived was silent and beautiful. Surrounded by tall crystal mountains and endless green mist, strange glowing plants lit up the night, and rivers hummed with soft blue light. It was peaceful, but it was not safe. 15 years had passed since the night Ethan found her by the sea. Lyra was no longer the small, frightened girl he had rescued. She had grown into a tall, graceful young woman. Her silver hair flowed down her back. Her violet eyes bright and curious. She moved like light, calm, quiet, but full of hidden strength. Ethan often watched her from a distance, fixing broken machines or studying the stars through an old telescope. He was proud of her, yet worried for years. He had trained her to hunt, to build, to fight, to survive. But he had kept one truth hidden. He had never told her who he really was every morning. Lyra would bring him fresh water from the stream and ask about his strange tools. "You always work on those metal things," she said once, "but what do they do?" Ethan looked up from a glowing blue device, its surface covered in old Earth symbols. He smiled faintly. "They're memories," he said. "Pieces of where I came from. Your world?" she asked, tilting her head. He nodded. "Earth," he whispered. "A place far beyond those stars." Lyra's eyes sparkled. "You said humans were brave," she said softly. "But everyone here says they were monsters. Are you one?" Ethan chuckled quietly. "Maybe both," he said. "Humans are complicated. We build and destroy. Love and hate, but sometimes we do the right thing, and even when it's hard," she smiled. Not fully understanding. But she could feel the truth in his words. To her, Ethan was not a monster. He was kind, gentle, and stronger than anyone she had ever seen. At night, they would sit near the fire and look at the stars. Ethan would tell her stories of Earth, blue oceans, wide deserts, tall cities that touched the sky, and people who dreamed of the stars. Lyra loved those stories. But she always asked the same question: "Why did you leave it?" And every time Ethan would go silent, his eyes darkening like storm clouds. "Some things," he would say, "are better forgotten." But the truth was heavy. Ethan had once been a soldier, a commander of Earth's last star fleet. During the final human war, when Earth fell to its own greed, his ship, the Aegis Dawn, escaped, carrying the last survivors, but the ship never made it home. It was hunted, ambushed, and scattered. He crash-landed on Valoria. The only one to survive, he had seen death, fire, betrayal. And when he saw the little girl lying half dead on the shore, something in him changed. She had reminded him of humanity's last hope, innocence that refused to die. One morning, Lyra returned from the forest carrying strange glowing fruit. "Ethan," she said, "I met someone, a trader from the city. He asked me where I came from." Ethan froze, his calm voice turning sharp. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I said I was from the valley, but..." He looked scared when I said my name. "What name did you use?" "Lyra," she said softly. Ethan's heart sank. He had warned her never to tell anyone her true name. That name belonged to a ghost. The princess the Valorians believed had died 15 years ago. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stepped outside and looked up at the twin moons. "They'll come," he whispered to himself. "They'll come for her." Inside the cave, Lyra slept peacefully, but her dreams were filled with fire and falling. She saw herself falling from the cliff again. And this time, she saw faces looking down at her, faces she almost remembered. The next day, Ethan began to prepare. He cleaned his weapons, powered up old human drones, and checked the beacon buried under the floor, an ancient human distress signal. For 15 years, it had remained silent. Lyra noticed his strange behavior. "Why are you cleaning those weapons?" she asked. "Just in case," he said quietly. "Sometimes peace is only the space between wars." She frowned. "I don't understand you sometimes." "You will," he said, giving her a small smile. When the stars start to move again, days passed, and the valley grew colder, the sky filled with strange lights, not stars, but ships moving far above the clouds. Lyra didn't notice it first, but Ethan did. He felt it deep in his bones, a familiar hum, a sound he had heard long ago during battle. He stepped outside at night, looking up. His eyes widened as he saw the royal crest of Valoria glowing on one of the ships. "They're here," he whispered. Lyra walked out beside him. "Who's here?" He didn't answer. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "It's time you knew," he said slowly. "You're not just anyone, Lyra. You're their lost princess, She froze, staring at him. What are you saying? They threw you off that cliff because you were half human, Ethan said, his voice low. But they failed, you lived. And now they're looking for you. Lyra's heart pounded, memories flooding back. The guards, the wind, the fall, the sea. Her hands trembled. Then I'll never hide again, she whispered. They took everything from me, but not this life you gave back. Ethan looked at her, proud. Sad and afraid all at once, he knew the time for hiding was over. Above them, thunder rolled across the sky. But it wasn't thunder, it was engines. Royal ships descending. Searching for someone who was supposed to be dead. Ethan looked at Lyra one last time and said, "No matter what happens, remember this, you're human too. And that makes you unstoppable." And far above the clouds, a silent beacon flickered once in the darkness, waiting for its signal to be heard again. The morning came cold and silent. The mist over the valley was thicker than ever. Hiding the mountains and the sky, even the river's glow seemed dim, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Lyra stood outside their cave home, her silver hair brushing against the wind. She had barely slept. Her mind was full of Ethan's words. "You're their lost princess." It sounded like a story, something impossible, but deep inside she knew it was true. The dreams she had and the faces, the voices, the cold hands that had pushed her. They were memories, not nightmares. Ethan was already awake, scanning the horizon through his cracked telescope. His face was hard and quiet. He had seen something that made his old soldier's instincts burn again. "There," he whispered. "See that smoke beyond the ridge?" Lyra followed his gaze. Through the mist, she saw faint trails of black smoke rising into the air. "Hunters?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Royal patrol ships. They're scanning the outer valleys, looking for signs of life." Lyra's heart raced. "For me," she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He began packing supplies and food, weapons, the plasma rifle, and a small metallic cube that hummed softly when he touched it. "What is that?" Lyra asked, watching the cube pulse with blue light. "An old key," he said quietly. "If we're found, it might be the only thing that saves us." They left their home and hid deep inside the forest. The air there was alive with glowing insects and whispering leaves. It was beautiful, but the beauty didn't comfort Lyra now. Every sound made her flinch. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps coming closer. Ethan moved ahead carefully, scanning with a small human device. "Thermal sweeps," he muttered. "They're close, 2 ships, one south, one north," Lyra frowned. "You can feel them?" He smiled weakly. "I've fought them before. They use the same search patterns." Hours passed as they stayed hidden. The sound of engines echoed faintly through the trees, low and rumbling like a beast hunting its prey. Suddenly a loud crack split the silence. A fallen branch under someone's boot. Ethan turned instantly. Raising his weapon from behind the trees, shapes appeared, tall armored figures with silver masks, the crest of the Valorian Empire shining on their chests. "Down!" Ethan shouted, pulling Lyra behind a fallen log. A blast of green plasma hit the tree trunk, burning through it. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Lyra's heart pounded as she crawled beside him. "They found us!" Ethan fired once in a bright blue flash, and one of the soldiers fell. The others took cover, shouting commands in Valorian. He grabbed her arm. "We can't fight them all. We run." They sprinted through the forest, dodging roots and rocks. Blasts exploded behind them, trees catching fire. Lyra stumbled, but Ethan pulled her up, never letting go. After a long chase, they reached a cliff overlooking the valley, the same kind of place where her story had begun. The sound of engines above grew louder. A ship hovered in the mist, lowering its landing gear. Lyra's eyes widened. "It's over." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." He opened his pack and pulled out the metallic cube. Placing it on the ground, it began to hum louder, its glow spreading into the soil like veins of light. "What are you doing?" She shouted over the roar of the engines. "Calling for help," he said, "the kind that even they can't stop." The cube's hum turned into a deep vibration. The ground trembled, and for a second everything went still. Then a beam of light shot straight into the sky, cutting through clouds far above the atmosphere. Something ancient woke up, a signal lost for centuries, blinking once, twice, then locking on. The Valorian soldiers stopped firing, confused by the sudden light. Their ship began to shake as the beam interfered with its systems. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "We move now." They ran along the cliffside, jumping into the river below. The cold water swallowed them whole, carrying them far downstream. Hours later, when they finally crawled onto the shore, Lyra looked back. The beam had faded, but something still glowed faintly in the sky. A line of blue light slowly moving in formation. What was that? She asked, breathing hard. Ethan sat beside her, soaked and silent. A call home, he said finally. If any humans are still out there, they'll hear it. Lyra stared at him, eyes wide. Humans? You mean? He nodded. Earth may be gone, but its fleet, some of it, might still be alive. Hidden, waiting. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the thought that her rescuer might not just be a man, but part of something far greater. Later that night, they camped in a small cave by the river. Ethan sat by the fire, lost in thought. He knew the Valorians would send more ships, and this time they'd bring elite hunters. They wouldn't stop until they found her. Lyra sat across from him, wrapping herself in a blanket. You knew this day would come, she said softly. I did, he admitted. That's why I stayed here, to keep you hidden. But now hiding won't be enough. She looked at him, her voice steady. Then we fight. Ethan looked up. Meeting her glowing violet eyes, he saw not the scared child he once saved, but a woman who carried the blood of two powerful worlds. A faint smile touched his lips. You really are your mother's daughter, he whispered, and your father's too. Outside, the night was alive with strange lights. Valorian search ships sweeping the sky, unaware that somewhere out there something far older, far stronger, had begun to awaken in response to a human signal. The hunters had returned, but they had no idea that this time, they were not the only ones hunting. The night over Valoria was no longer calm. Strange ripples of blue light moved across the stars like waves in the dark. Even the animals of the valley hid in silence, sensing something powerful had awakened. Lyra sat by the campfire, staring into the flames. Her thoughts ran wild. The chase, the escape, the soldiers, and the beam of light that had pierced the heavens. It had come from Ethan's strange cube. The key he carried for years now. That same key had changed everything. Ethan sat nearby, cleaning the human plasma rifle. His hands calm, though his eyes showed quiet worry. He had seen what the beam meant. He had felt the pulse, a signal from Earth's ancient systems, a call that should never have worked. Lyra finally spoke, her voice low. You said it was a call to who? Ethan looked at her, his face lit by the fire. To anyone still listening, he said. To those who remember what it means to be human. She frowned. You think they'll come? He hesitated. If they still exist, yes. Lyra looked toward the stars. And if they don't? Ethan smiled faintly. Then we're on our own. But at least we tried. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the crackling of the fire, but above them the stars shifted ever so slightly. Far beyond Valoria's skies, deep in the frozen void, something old and forgotten stirred. A derelict warship drifted in the dark, its hull covered in dust and ice. Inside, machines hummed weakly, waiting for a command that would never come. Until now, the signal reached it like a whisper. Aegis Dawn, priority code, Earth origin confirmed. The ship's dark engines flickered once. Then twice, lights began to glow across its hull. Systems came online one by one deep inside. A cold voice spoke from the main console. Signal verified. Human distress beacon active. Coordinates locked. Then one after another. Other signals answered. Smaller ships, lost cruisers. Hidden colonies, all buried in the dark corners of the galaxy. Each of them received the same pulse, the same ancient code, and one by one, they awakened. Back on Valoria, Ethan felt a faint vibration in the ground beneath him. He looked up, his face turning pale. It worked, he whispered. Lyra turned to him quickly. What worked? The fleet, he said, his eyes wide with disbelief. They're moving, I can feel their resonance. It's impossible. Before Lyra could speak, the ground shook again, this time stronger, from the sky. A thin line of blue light cut through the clouds. Not an attack, but a transmission. It split into thousands of fragments. Scattering like falling stars, Lyra stared in awe. What is that? Recognition pattern, Ethan said quietly. They've locked onto my signal. They're confirming my ID. She looked at him, confused. Your ID? You mean, I was a commander once, he admitted. of the Earth Defense Fleet. I never thought anyone would still be listening after all these years. Lyra's eyes widened. She had always known there was more to Ethan than he admitted, but hearing it made her heart race. So you called them here? He nodded slowly. Yes, but I don't know what they've become 15 years. No more than that. Centuries may have passed in deep space. We have no idea what kind of humanity still exists out there. The forest around them was alive with strange sounds, not from animals, but from the sky. Static hummed faintly in the air. Like a ghostly voice whispering through invisible radio waves, Lyra shivered. Will they help us? Ethan looked up at the night sky. They'll come for the signal, he said, but we'll have to make them see why we need them. By dawn, the Valorian ships had moved closer. The Queen's command fleet had begun scanning the region where the beacon had been activated. High in orbit, a silver battleship named Raviel's Pride hovered silently. Its captain, a tall, cold woman with eyes like glass, received the report. Your Majesty, said her officer through the comm, we've tracked a forbidden human energy source in the valley. Coordinates locked, the Queen's voice answered, soft but sharp. Find whoever triggered it. Bring them to me alive if the child still lives. I want her to see what her loyalty has cost her world. Down below, Ethan and Lyra packed up quickly, preparing to move deeper into the mountains. But Lyra stopped and looked back at the rising sun. Her heart was heavy, but her mind clear. I don't want to run anymore, she said quietly. Ethan paused. Lyra, she turned to him, her violet eyes glowing faintly. They called me cursed, she said, but maybe I was meant to survive. Maybe I'm not just Valorian or human. Maybe I'm something that connects them both. Ethan's expression softened. You sound like your father, he said with a sad smile. She blinked. You knew him? He nodded slowly. A good man, a captain. He believed in peace even when both worlds hated him for it. Lyra's heart ached. But she stood tall. Then I'll finish what he started. Before Ethan could reply, a blinding light flashed across the sky, blue and white, forming a perfect circle above the horizon. A voice echoed faintly through the air. Low and metallic, human distress beacon confirmed. This is Fleet Unit 7, responding to Earth Command Code, awaiting orders. Ethan fell to his knees, unable to believe what he was hearing. They came, he whispered. After all this time, they came. Lyra looked up, her eyes shining. The humans, the legends her world had feared and erased, were returning, but she didn't know that their arrival would not only bring salvation, but also a storm that could destroy both worlds far above. Dozens of black human ships aligned in silence, their engines glowing blue like waking giants, their sensors locked onto Valoria, and the message repeated one last time. This is the hidden human fleet. Earth lives. The royal city of Valoria glowed beneath twin suns, silver towers rising like blades from the dust. The air shimmered with the hum of energy fields and the whispers of a nervous people. Rumors had spread across the empire. A forbidden signal, an old human weapon, a ghost from the past. The queen sat on her throne, her golden crown gleaming under cold light. She was older now, her beauty sharp as glass, but her eyes restless, haunted by a name that refused to die. Lyra. She had silenced that name 15 years ago, or so she believed. Now the same name returned in frightened whispers from her spies, from the captains of her ships, from the dreams that woke her in the dark. Impossible, she muttered. The girl fell. I saw it myself. Her advisor bowed low before her. Your Majesty, the patrols found strange traces, human energy weapons and footprints that match her size. The Queen's fingers tightened around the armrest. Bring me proof, she said coldly, or bring me their heads. Far beyond the city walls, hidden under the shade of wide crystal trees, Lyra watched the skyline of her birth city for the first time since her fall. The sight made her chest tighten. The palace floated on light bridges, surrounded by rivers that shimmered like mirrors. The banners of her mother's house waved proudly, the same banners that once ordered her death. Ethan crouched beside her, studying the security patterns through a small holographic screen. Every gate is locked, he said quietly, and they'll scan anyone for bloodline markers. Lyra's gaze stayed fixed on the distant palace. Then I'll give them something to scan, she said softly. He looked at her sharply. You're not thinking, I'm going home, she said, but not as their lost child. I'll go as one of their own. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, an identity crystal Ethan had repaired using both human and Valorian tech. It flickered for a moment, then displayed a false ID. Healer from the southern provinces. Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes were full of worry. If they find out who you are, they'll kill you on sight. Lyra smiled faintly. They already tried once, by midday. The city gates were full of travelers, merchants, healers, workers, all waiting to be scanned by the royal guards. Lyra walked among them, wearing a simple white cloak that covered her hair and face. Her heartbeat raced, but her steps were steady. When the guard took her hand to scan, the device blinked green. Healer. Province verified, he said, waving her through. She breathed out slowly and entered the city. The streets were alive with color and fear. Soldiers patrolled in groups, drones scanned the sky, and banners read, "Beware the human signal." Lyra's eyes darted everywhere, memories flashing in her mind at the gardens she once played in. The fountain where she laughed with her father, the balcony from where her mother once sang. But the city had changed. It felt colder, quieter, as if hope had been drained out of it. She moved through the alleys, blending with the crowd, until she reached the outer walls of the royal palace. There, her heart stopped. 2 royal guards were standing at the main gate, their armor marked with the same crest she had seen on the night of her fall, the mark of those who threw her off the cliff. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to walk forward. She could not let fear control her now. "State your purpose," one of them barked. "I was sent by the City Healers Guild," she said calmly, lowering her hood just enough to show her face. "There is illness among the Queen's staff." "I was called to help." The guard looked at her suspiciously, then waved her through. "Be quick," he muttered. Lyra stepped into the palace, her breath caught in her throat. The same halls, the same white marble floors, but emptier, colder. Each step echoed through memories, her small footprints long erased. Yet her soul remembered every corner. At the end of the hall stood the throne room, guarded by tall crystal doors. Lyra paused, her reflection shimmering on the polished floor. "Ethan," she whispered through her earpiece. "I'm inside," his voice came through static. "Be careful. They've increased signal jammers. I might lose you soon." Then his voice faded. Leaving her alone, Lyra pushed open the doors. The sound echoed like thunder. The Queen looked up from her throne, her sharp eyes narrowing at the stranger who dared enter without permission. "Who are you?" the Queen asked, her tone icy. Lyra bowed low, hiding her face beneath the hood. "A healer, my Queen," she said softly. "I came because your advisors requested aid." The Queen studied her for a moment. "Lift your head," she ordered. Lyra obeyed, slowly raising her face for a moment. The Queen's expression didn't change, then her eyes widened. She froze, and the face before her was older, stronger but unmistakable. The same silver hair, the same violet eyes, the same scar on her temple. Her hand trembled slightly. "No," she whispered, "it cannot be." Lyra's voice was calm, steady. "Hello, Mother," she said. The Queen rose from her throne, her crown shaking in her hand. You were dead," she stammered. Lyra smiled faintly. "You made sure of that." Before the Queen could reply, a loud alarm echoed through the palace. The walls trembled, servants screamed, and guards rushed in shouting, "Your Majesty! Ships in the sky. Unknown fleet above orbit." The Queen turned toward the window, her eyes wide with horror. Through the high glass, dozens of dark shapes appeared above the city. Black human ships glowing with blue engines. Their lights formed a ring in the sky. Ethan's voice finally came through the comm in Lyra's ear. Faint but clear. "They found us," he said. "And they're not coming quietly." Lyra turned her gaze toward the heavens. Her heart pounding, she whispered, "Let them see what humanity really looks like." Above the royal city, thunder rolled as the hidden human fleet arrived, silent, vast and unstoppable, and for the first time in centuries, Valoria looked up and realized it was no longer alone under the stars. The palace shook like thunder had struck it. Guards stumbled through the halls as bright blue light poured through every window. The air vibrated with deep metallic echoes that no one on Valoria had ever heard before. The Queen stood frozen beside her throne, staring through the tall glass walls. Above the city, black ships covered the sky, silent and immense. Each one glowed with cold blue fire and strange symbols that no Valorian could read. Lyra stood beside her mother, her hood fallen back, her silver hair shining in the light from the ships. Her violet eyes reflected the fleet that hung above like judgment from the heavens. The queen turned to her slowly, her face pale. "What have you done?" she whispered. Lyra's voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "I didn't bring them to destroy you," she said softly. "I brought them to remind you. Humanity still lives." The queen's hands trembled. "Humanity," she spat. "Those monsters of the old wars? You dare call them allies?" Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "I call them what they are, survivors." Outside, the sky flashed again, and one of the ships lowered through the clouds. Its engines hummed like distant thunder, dust swirling across the city as thousands of Valorians ran into the streets to see. The ship hovered above the palace courtyard, its size enough to shadow half the royal grounds. Then, through the hum of energy, a deep voice echoed through every speaker, every device, every crystal channel in the city. "This is Commander Ethan Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet," the voice said, steady and calm. "We come in peace, but we do not bow." The queen stumbled back. "Ethan," she whispered, the name heavy with disbelief. "He was a myth, a ghost from the human wars." Lyra smiled faintly. "He's real, and he's the one who saved your daughter when you threw her away." The queen's face twisted, a mix of shock and shame. "You lie," she hissed. "You lied to destroy me," but her voice faltered as holographic screens lit up in midair, projecting images from the human fleet, files, signals, even video from Ethan's ship showing him carrying a small child from the sea 15 years ago. The court gasped, ministers whispered, soldiers dropped their weapons. The truth was no longer a story, it was undeniable. Ethan's voice continued, firm but calm. 15 years ago, I found a dying child on your shores. She was abandoned by your own. But I did what humans have always done. I saved her." His words spread through the city like fire, through speakers and airwaves, even through the minds of those who listened in stunned silence. Lyra took a slow step forward, her eyes locked on her mother's. "You called me cursed because I was half human," she said quietly. "But it was that part of me that let me survive. That part that you feared most, that was the part that saved me." The queen's legs gave way, and she sank onto her knees. "I did it to protect the throne," she whispered. "The people would never have accepted you. You were too different." Lyra knelt beside her, her voice soft but strong. "Then maybe your throne never deserved them." Outside, the streets were chaos. Citizens shouting, ships circling. Soldiers unsure whether to attack or surrender. Then, a blinding beam of light came down from the largest human ship, Aegis Dawn. The same ship that once crashed on Valoria's seas, now reborn and alive from within the beam. A figure appeared, Ethan, clad in dark, battle-worn armor with the insignia of Earth still glowing on his chest. He stepped forward through the light. Calm, unshaken Valorian guards aimed their rifles, but Lyra raised a hand. "Stand down," she commanded. Her voice carried through the entire hall. Her mother looked up, eyes wide. Lyra was no longer just her daughter. She was something more, something greater. Ethan walked to her side, standing tall beside her. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered under his breath. But his tone held pride, not anger. "I had to see this through," she replied softly. Ethan turned to the queen, his expression unreadable. "We didn't come for revenge," what he said. "We came for truth. For too long, Valoria's history has painted humans as beasts. But it was never us who started the wars. It was fear." The queen said nothing. Her crown lay on the floor beside her, the jewels dim. Lyra spoke again, her voice echoing through the hall. "The fear that once divided our worlds ends today. I am not human or Valorian, I am both." The entire court fell silent. Her words carried weight that silenced centuries of hate. Ethan looked at her in proud amaze, then raised his hand toward the ceiling. Activating a small device, instantly, images appeared above them. Holographic archives from human ships showing the truth. Ancient Valorian leaders had allied with humans once, building cities, sharing knowledge, until a betrayal ended it all. The humans had been erased from history, called invaders to hide the shame of royal treachery. The queen stared up, her lips trembling. We lied to them," she whispered. Ethan's tone was firm but calm. "Now you can tell them the truth." Outside, the skies thundered as human ships hovered low, their lights painting the city in blue fire, but none fired. They waited, watching, silent, as if giving the Valorians one final chance to choose peace. Lyra turned to her mother, her voice soft. "You once threw me into darkness," she said. But I came back with light. Tears filled the Queen's eyes. For the first time in her life, she bowed. Not to the fleet, not to fear, but to her daughter. Ethan looked at Lyra and whispered, "They'll listen to you now." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then let them hear what it means to be human." Above the royal city, the fleet lights dimmed to soft blue, forming a glowing circle in the sky, a symbol of peace, not power. And in that moment, both races, human and Valorian, looked up and saw not enemies, but reflections of each other. The truth had been revealed, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The palace was silent after the storm. The roaring engines of the human fleet had quieted. The thunder had faded, and all that remained was a soft hum in the air. The city below still glowed faintly blue from the lights of the ships above. Inside the throne hall, smoke and dust drifted through beams of sunlight. Broken banners hung from the ceiling. The Queen sat at the bottom of the steps, her golden crown lying shattered beside her. Lyra stood in the center of the hall, her silver hair glowing softly in the light. Ethan stood behind her, his armor scorched, his face calm but tired. The Valorian ministers knelt one by one, not out of fear but because they had seen the truth. They had seen the ships, heard the message, felt the strength of those who had been called monsters, and realized what real courage looked like. Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "For 15 years you ruled with fear," she said. "You erased truth to keep your throne safe. You called compassion weakness. You called love a curse." Her mother raised her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I thought the people would never follow someone born of two worlds." Lyra stepped closer. "Then let them decide," she said, and turned toward the open balcony below. Thousands of Valorians had gathered outside the palace walls, the entire city glowing under the pale light of the human ships. Their eyes lifted as Lyra stepped out, the silver cloak flowing behind her. The wind carried her voice through the city as she spoke. "My name is Lyra Valoria," she said, "daughter of two worlds, Valorian by birth, human by spirit," the crowd murmured. Some gasped, others wept. She continued, "I was cast away because I was different. I was told I didn't belong, but a human found me, and he taught me what my world forgot: mercy, courage, and hope." Ethan watched her quietly. His eyes full of pride, Lyra raised her hand toward the sky, where the human fleet hovered like stars. "The humans were not our enemies," she said. "They were our mirrors. They showed us what we could become if we dared to care instead of fear." The crowd fell to its knees. Soldiers dropped their weapons and bowed, not to a conqueror, but to someone who had returned from death and brought peace with her. Ethan stepped beside her. "They're ready," he whispered. She nodded. "Then let the past end today." From above, a great beam of blue light descended slowly. Not a weapon, but a bridge, connecting the flagship Aegis Dawn with the palace. It was a symbol of union, of trust between two long-divided species. Ethan motioned, and from the light emerged a small group of humans, scientists, leaders, survivors of the hidden fleet. They stepped onto Valorian soil for the first time in centuries. The crowd stared in awe. Humans looked strange yet familiar, not monsters, not demons, just people. One of the human officers, an old woman with white hair, approached Ethan and bowed her head. "Commander, Earth is gone, but humanity remains," she said quietly. "We're ready to rebuild." Lyra turned to her. "Then you won't rebuild alone," she said.
"Valoria will stand with you." The old officer looked into her glowing violet eyes and smiled faintly.
"You really are his daughter," she whispered. "The captain would be proud." Lyra's breath caught. She knew who they meant. Her father. The human captain who had once loved the Queen of Valoria and paid the price for peace. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Then I'll finish what he started." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's time," he said softly. Lyra stepped forward toward the old throne. The broken crown lay on the steps. Its jewels scattered. She picked it up and held it high. The crowd watched, breathless. "I do not wear this for power," she said, her voice steady. "I wear it for peace." She placed the crown on her head, and as she did, a burst of golden and blue light spread across the hall, merging Valorian energy and human light, blending into one brilliant color. The crowd cheered, not with fear, but with hope. The palace bells rang for the first time in decades. Outside, the human ships lowered their weapons, their lights dimming to peaceful white. Some landed, others hovered low, shining beams down over the people below. For the first time in centuries, humans and Valorians stood together and face to face, side by side, not as enemies but as survivors of the same sky. Ethan looked up at the fleet and smiled faintly. "We made it," he whispered. Lyra turned to him. "You once told me peace is only the space between wars," she said softly. "Then I'll make that space last forever," he smiled back. "You sound more human every day," she laughed gently. "No, Ethan. I sound like both." The twin suns rose over Valoria, lighting the new dawn. The city's silver towers reflected the glow of the ships, and the winds carried the sound of thousands of voices chanting one name, Lyra the Human Queen. High above, the fleet began to move again, not as conquerors but as protectors, forming a shining ring around the planet. From that day forward, Valoria and the remnants of Earth were no longer two worlds. They became one, united by the girl they once threw away and the man who refused to let her die. As the suns climbed higher, Lyra stood at the balcony, watching the fleet rise into the light, her heart calm, her eyes full of purpose. The universe was vast, full of scars and silence, but now it had hope again, and the legend would be told across 1,000 worlds.